Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. Joe and I are here to talk a little bit more about tips and tricks on how you can have a successful interviewing process and hopefully help you land your next internship. My name is Amy Rohlman, and I'm the HR director over at MRPR, CPAs and Advisors, and we are located in Southfield. And I'll let Joe take a moment. There you go.
Yeah, and I'm Joe Bamberger. I'm the talent acquisition specialist for Clayton and McKervey. We're a CPA firm also located in Southfield.
So Joe and I have a lot of years of experience in conducting interviews, so we are very happy to be talking about this topic with all of you. We hope you will again walk away with some valuable information that you can apply immediately towards your next interview. We will open up for questions at the end, so we'll jump right into it.
So today we're going to talk about the types of interviews that you might encounter. Obviously, you might have phone interviews, video interviews, which there's a couple of types of that you might encounter, and then obviously a little less frequent now with COVID, but face-to-face interviews are still a thing and will continue to be a thing post-COVID.
So once you land the interview, we want to make sure you definitely get off on the right foot. We have some key items here noted. Definitely want to keep it at the forefront of your mind as you're working through any interview process. We're going to touch on each of these a little bit more throughout the presentation. This is also a great checklist. If you want to use it as you're getting ready for your interviews, make sure you're geared up, ready for success, not only for internships or maybe even full-time opportunities as you move along in your career.
First and foremost, before any interview, you want to make sure you're doing your research and being prepared. So when we talk about doing your research, it's understanding the firm or the organization in which you're interviewing for, right? So checking out their website, their social media, Glassdoor, LinkedIn, understanding, what drives them as a business, what's their mission statement, what are their core values, because you can bet that most interviews will tend to find out if you match those core values or not. So understanding what they are beforehand will set you up to understand what's going to be asked and how to make sure you're successful throughout that interview. Understanding who their leadership is and things that are showing up in the news that involves them. So most companies do a pretty good job of highlighting their leadership and their news clippings throughout their website, but a quick Google search can find out a lot of that as well. But by understanding that, you'll understand what's motivating the decisions they make, what are they focused on, what area of expertise do they have. And then what every recruiter and company will do is they'll let you know who you're interviewing with. So make sure you're looking up who those interviewers are before you go in the interview. Checking us out on LinkedIn, looking at our profile on our individual websites. You'll find out that, hey, maybe we have something in common. Maybe we went to the same school, or we're in the same clubs, or have some of the same charitable interests. And it just kind of gives you some information to understand about us and create a connection, right? An interview is a short amount of time to build a relationship, and if you can go in with a little information beforehand, that'll really help you. And when we talk about being prepared, right, it's just setting yourself up for success. Confirm your interview to make sure that they know you're going to be there at the right time. Make sure you're arriving early, but not too early. So what I find is get there as early as you can, but sit in your car until you're 10 to 15 minutes early. So you're not walking in half hour, 45 minutes early. That stresses people out. But it's one of those things that if you're showing up just at the time that your interview is going to start, you're probably already a little late. But also understanding that a lot of firms are in large office parks, and it might take some time to walk from your car to the lobby. And so understanding that you want to build yourself in a few minutes of transportation time in that case. So that way you're not arriving 3 minutes early, but it takes you 4 minutes to walk to the lobby, right? Then you'll end up being late. So just understand that a little bit. Make sure you review the job description. Make sure you're speaking to the bullet points that we're asking for in our descriptions. I'm sure everyone here has heard of, like the STAR method of interviewing, but just making sure you're using your various experience to answer questions, whether that's from school, work experiences, extracurricular, clubs, having examples in your mind ready to go. As like everyone, you can Google the typical interview questions that most of us will start with, preparing those responses in advance, because that everyone's going to ask you, tell me about yourself. Everyone's going to ask you, hey, why accounting, or why audit, why tax, right? And having those answers prepared is a really good idea. That you're going to get situational and behavioral questions, the tell me about a time when type questions. And so if you understand what a company's core values are, you can probably guess that their behavioral questions will have something to do with those. And you can prepare stories about teamwork or working with others or dealing with conflict, right? Those are types of things that you can have answers, or at least examples that you can touch on, ready to go in your head. And then kind of key thing is every interview ends the exact same way. I don't care if you're interviewing for a staff accountant position or to work, fast food. Every interview ends with, do you have any questions for me? And I guarantee you that every recruiter here will tell you that if you do not have questions, it's really hard to move forward in the process, right? That to us means you're not prepared. It means you don't really see yourself as working at that firm. So prepare a list of questions beforehand that you can ask, write them down. If you're coming in with 10 questions, odds are we'll probably cover a number of them throughout the normal conversation that we're having, but it'll set you up to be able to reference that list when we inevitably ask, do you have any questions for me? Make sure you're bringing extra resumes with you and need a pad of paper and a pen to take notes, and making sure you arrive with confidence, right? We can feel that when you arrive, and it really helps you stand out.
So now we're going to talk a little bit how to dress for success. So how you dress for your interview definitely can portray a positive first impression, and ultimately that's what you want to do. Seeing also that a lot of interviews are being conducted virtually now, and even into the future. Having a strong virtual presence is also just as important as if you're meeting with the recruiting team and the interviewing team in person. You may also notice that workplaces are starting to get a little more casual. You could wear jeans during the week now, definitely a little more maybe relaxed attire. So it's really important that you choose a business professional or a business casual look when you're going in for your interviews. So these pictures here give you a good idea to decipher between the two, what that looks for men and women. Really, again, just do your research, really look to see kind of what you can find out about the firm. Ask the recruiters, ask HR. As you're setting up the interview, what is the dress code? Nothing wrong with asking that question. Always make sure too that you're dressing up. Really, dress as professional as you can. If the office is business casual, and if all you can dress is business casual, that's totally acceptable. But always want to make sure you either meet or exceed the dress code for the firm that you're going to be interviewing with. Again, nonetheless, whenever in doubt, dress as professional as you can. You always want to make sure you walk in with a very strong first impression.
When we talk about body language, it's one of those things that it's hard to practice, but good to be aware of. It's something that we notice as recruiters, something that we pay attention to. So just some kind of basic thoughts is make sure you're making eye contact with the interviewers. If you're interviewing in front of a panel, make sure you're answering and looking at everyone on that panel and not just one person, right? You're speaking to a group and you need to acknowledge the others in the room. Make sure you have good posture, right? Especially, with a lot of interviews becoming virtual, right? Make sure you're sitting in a place where you can sit up straight. Just makes you feel like you have more energy. No one wants hands to be a distraction, right? I use the Donald Trump as an example where you're talking like this, if you can see my picture right now, and it's just wildly distracting, and that's all we'll pay attention to. So control what your hands are doing, try not to fidget with them, try not to, tap your toes or bounce your knee up and down, right? It's just distracting, right? I know everyone's nervous going to interviews, but do what you can to control that. handshakes, if we're going to ever be doing handshakes again, it's something that, every recruiter can tell you, weird handshakes they've had. So just make sure you have a strong, firm handshake. If you're someone that is very nervous, and if you're like me, I sweat for no reason, right? Wipe your hand off before you go to shake someone's hand. But odds are we might not be doing handshakes again. So we got to start working on, I guess, professional fist bumps. But beyond that, right, smile, right? Whether you're on a phone interview or face-to-face, right, you can hear a smile and it just makes you sound more engaged, more enthused, more likely that I'll like you, which is the goal of any interview.
All right, phone interviews. So these are traditionally the first step to any interviewing process, usually probably the most comfortable for candidates to conduct, but they can also be the most stressful. This is sort of the make or break into the next round of the interviewing process. So to help reduce that level of stress, when you're invited to conduct a phone interview with the firm, just make sure you pick a time that works for you. Really be aware of any back-to-back appointments that you have. You really want to be sure, I've seen this multiple times, that you're not running from one interview to another or one commitment to the interview. So really just be aware of your schedule, pick a time that works for you. Again, proper planning, making sure you're giving your time in between commitments. Think ahead as to where you plan to take that phone call. Where can you be that's going to be the quietest, provide the least amount of distractions so you can successfully have that call. Also during a phone interview, make sure you have your resume in front of you. Make sure you're jotting down some key highlights, things that you want to make sure that you mention during the interview. Some of the skills and successes that you've had. Also, any questions. Again, I know it was mentioned before, coming to the interview with questions looks so good. And if you, at the very end, don't have any, it's sort of a deal breaker a lot of times. If you're conducting a phone interview, make sure you're taking notes. As the conversation's rolling, things are going to come up. There's there's nothing wrong with taking notes during. We're not going to be able to see you on the phone. The only potential negative impact would be if the conversation stops and there's a lot of dead air during the interview. So really, if you're taking down notes, just make sure you're really staying engaged in the conversation. Make sure you're ready at the scheduled time. Whatever time the phone interview is scheduled for, make sure you're available at that time, ideally a few minutes before. Make sure that everything's set up, you're ready to go. Make sure your cell connection is strong. Things can go wrong. You think you have the strongest cell connection and next thing you know, you're in a dead space and you're not getting the phone call. So, things happen. If you miss the call and it goes to voicemail, just really obviously follow up as soon as possible with the interviewer. Obviously apologize for the mishap and see when you can, reschedule or even conduct the interview right then and there, depending on the timing of the delay. Again, I know Joe kind of touched on it. Make sure, you stay positive, make sure you smile. Even over the phone, we can feel that energy, be positive in who you are, what you have to share, and the experience that you can bring to a firm.
All right, let's touch on video interviews because these are becoming more and more the norm. So we're going to talk about two types of video interviews. One is similar to like a Zoom call like this, where it's a two-way back and forth. The other is a one-way video interview. And for those of you that have had to do one-way video interviews, know how awful they can feel, right? And so we want to set you up to be as successful as possible. So what we'll kind of touch on here is just any video interview first, and then I'll dive into some of the specifics of each individual one. So for any video interview, you want to make sure you find a quiet place that's free from distraction, right? If you're doing it from an apartment or a dorm room, right? Politely ask your roommates not to be around when you're doing it, right? You want to control the environment around you. You want to make sure that there's not noise or someone yelling or talking in the background that could just be unnecessarily distracting. Test your equipment and software if you can beforehand, right? If you've never logged into this software before, see if you can get an account and test with a friend to make sure it works, make sure the lighting looks fine in your area. make sure your sound and speakers and everything is all tied in and working. In a virtual interview, you want to dress like you would be face-to-face, right? So we talked about dressing for success earlier, right? You want to dress that same way in a virtual interview. And I have worked with companies in the past that have found ways to get their candidates to stand up during an interview. Make sure you have your resume in front of you. It's a great way to reference your experience and your education as you're going through it. The next point I can't emphasize enough: pay attention to what's around you and what the camera can see. Right? If you're in a dorm room or apartment, right? I don't want to see like your trophies of alcohol bottles behind you, right? I don't want to see all your posters, right? I can tell you horror stories of roommates walking naked behind candidates. I've seen sex toys on nightstands behind people. Like, clean your room and make sure you pay attention to what's behind you, right? Because we do a lot of video interviews. They all kind of blend together, and I just start paying attention to what's around you. So the less distracting it is, the more I can focus on you. So pay attention to what your camera can see. And then make eye contact with the camera when you can, right? It's really distracting if you're off looking, at something in your room, or if you're staring at your face low in the corner, right? It's noticeable. So look at the camera, look at the eyes of the person interviewing you, and it tends to set you up for success. So these things are true with any type of video interview. The one thing I'll say for those that haven't had the one-way interviews, I'll kind of just briefly explain them. It's a question pops up on your screen. You get 5 minutes to record an answer. There's not anyone else there to gauge how you're doing, banter with, right? You're just answering questions. A lot of the softwares will give you a trial period. So you'll have a chance to practice your answer before it's actually recorded live. Everyone has their own way of doing things. I find, at least for me, what I find works best is if you have that practice time, don't actually practice your answer. Take notes, make points of what you're going to say, and then just do it live when it's your turn to record it. I find that the answers tend to sound more genuine. They tend to sound more like your personality, less scripted. And if you're anything like me, you forget what you said the first time and what you've already said this time, and you tend to forget things the second time through. And so I find I do better if I just make some notes, some bullet points, and then go through it one time like I would in a live face-to-face interview. But do what works for you. If you like that practice time, use it appropriately to put your best foot forward. But just know a lot of companies, especially the bigger the companies they are, tend to be moving more towards these one-way interviews just to save the time, so recruiters and managers can actually see more candidates.
Okay, face-to-face interviews. So these have obviously been either eliminated or reduced over the last year. So hopefully things start to open back up and we're able to start doing more face-to-face interviews in the near future. I know we're kind of running short on time, so I'll just kind of go over some key points here. A lot of it was mentioned earlier as well. When you're arriving for a face-to-face interview, again, 10 to 15 minutes early, walking into the office is great. Joe had mentioned it earlier, you walk in any earlier and it kind of causes a lot more stress on the interviewing team. You're sitting around waiting, nerves start to build up. So 10 to 15 minutes, get there early, sit in your car, kind of review your resume, get yourself prepared. Really staying positive. Again, smile, be positive and confident in what you have to share and what your experiences are. Present yourself in a very positive manner. Bring extra copies of your resume, something you can write on. Again, it's pretty standard, even with virtual and phone interviews too. Turning off your cell phone. I've had this happen before with some candidates in the middle of the interview, the phone starts ringing. So definitely just double check everything before you walk in. You got your resume, your phone's turned off, you have your writing supplies, you feel good and confident. And then last but not least, just understand that everyone you meet when you walk through that door can impact your candidacy. So you may have the receptionist who welcomes you. Myself as HR, we will walk you around the office and give you a tour. The interviewing team, anyone you may have, come across as you're using the restroom beforehand. Anyone that you meet could potentially impact your candidacy. So just make sure you're always putting your best foot forward. And before you leave, just take a time to thank everybody, who took time to meet with you as well.
And then finally, just after the interview, it's always a good idea to send a thank you note, whether that's email or handwritten. We like to see that. Never hurts your chances. It might not be the deal breaker, but it definitely shows that you're interested in the position. Don't be afraid to ask the interview what their hiring process is and timeline, so that way you can pace your follow-ups. And when extended an offer, don't be afraid to ask for more time. Be honest along the way and treat companies the way you want to be treated.